Okay, so in this video demonstration, I'll be showing you how to track manually this playground sequence. So first, load up your VFX motion tracking, and then click on open and locate the image sequence. So this is the sequence that we are going to be tracking. Click on the first frame. Sorry, not this one. Let me just reopen another one. This one, the playground. Okay, and then we're going to click on this set scene frames prefetched, so you load up into the memory. And next, you notice that the image is a little bit washed out. We got to change the colors. So go over to the color management under the render properties, and then change from filmic to standard. And then now we can decide how we track this sequence. Okay, first we need to observe and check this sequence, right, for good patterns to track. Now for this type of environment, right, the type of best tracking motion model would be perspective or affine. Location and all the way to location rotation scale will be very fast, but it might not be the most accurate. Okay, so I prefer to use perspective for this shot. And then for match, I use previous frame, so that you use the previous frame as reference before it tracks forward. Normalize, so that each frame, right, or each frame as it tracks, right, the lighting will be equalized, right, or normalized. And then for the tracking settings, the correlation can be set at 0.9 for higher accuracy. Margin you can put at 25 pixels, so that when the tracker reaches about 25 pixels next to the border, it will stop tracking. Okay, so with these settings on, I'm going to increase the tracking pattern size from 40 to 110 for the search size. And then we can start to pick up our first track point. So I'm going to pick this leaf, this dark shadow, the tip here, as my tracking point of interest. So holding down the control and left mouse click to create a tracker point over the area. So now we are at frame 1. Now I want to see the search area, so press Alt S to bring out the search area. Now if you take a look at this angle where the shot is being taken, you can see that there's a perspective distortion over here. So I'm going to change the shape of this tracker so that it matches the perspective distortion of the tile here. If you take a look at this tile here, you can see that at this angle, the distortion of the perspective shows it like that. So this is why I'm changing the area of interest to look like that. If you click on the tracker tab here, you can see that this is what it will look like if you're looking from the top view of this leaf here. Okay, so as I adjust this, you can see that it's now being re-distorted to match the vertical view from the top. So with this on, I'm going to increase the size of the search area, and then I press Ctrl T or click on track forward to track this shot. Now if you want the tracker to be visible in the center, you can just press L to lock it, and then so that it will appear in the center. And my tracker has stopped at this frame because of the motion blur. So if you see a motion blur, you can just use your cursor to navigate to the next frame, then click on this track window here, and then you can click and drag the track window to match it to the previous frame. And you want to use your cursor to navigate left and right, the previous frame and then the manually planted keyframe, to check that it matches the correct position. So go to the last keyframe and notice a diamond appears in the dope sheet. This is the keyframe that I manually added. Then I can track forwards, and it should track all the way towards the end. Okay, so now it has managed to track all the way to the entire timeline. You can left mouse click and drag the timeline, and then just inspect and check that the tracking point is staying put at the position that we want. Okay, there is a bit of slide due to the motion blur, but that is fine. So then you can click on the lock to lock it in position. Okay, next we're going to track this pattern here. Okay, there's a very obvious corner here, and then I'm just going to use a bigger search area and then stretch this to match the perspective of the pattern like that. Okay, and then we are actually right now we are not at the first frame, so I'm going to track backwards and click on this button to track backwards. So if you want, you can actually start from the middle and then track backwards, then you go back to the middle again and then track forwards. So I'm going to click on the timeline here. So click on the number region so that you can drag to the last frame that was being tracked. Then click on this button to track forward. Keep an eye on this track area here. Okay, this one, right, the track point of this corner here is going to disappear. So we're going to leave it at that. Then we can lock this track point here. Okay, ideally, right, you want to try to search for points that appear all the way from beginning to the end. So I noticed a leaf cutting this edge here. So I'm going to use this point as my tracker. I'm going to press S to scale it up slightly. Okay, this time I don't want to adjust the perspective. Maybe I just adjust a little bit like that, just to match the perspective shift here. Then track forwards. And again, because of the motion blur, then it goes out of view. So I'm going to click on this track window and then manually adjust it until it matches the blurred position, which is around here. Then continue to track all the way towards the end. Okay, another blur, motion blur, or sometimes because this edge is nearing the search area, so we're going to increase the search area a little bit. That will add another keyframe, and then we're going to track forwards. Okay, so it tracks all the way to the end. Now we scrub backwards until to the last frame. Then I'm just going to increase the search area a little bit and then track backwards. Okay, motion blur again. And let's see whether I can change the shape a little bit. Maybe increase the area of interest. See whether that will continue to track backwards. Okay, it doesn't want to track forwards. So we have to manually move it into place. And again, use the cursor key left, right to check the previous frame and then the next frame. Okay, I think I moved that too high, just maybe right about here. Okay, this is good. Then continue to track backwards. Okay, so again, another motion blur. Okay, we're going to click on this frame, the last frame, and then I'm going to manually move it into place. Okay, and then let it track all the way to the end. Okay, this time I want to change the shape a little bit. And then hopefully it will continue to track. Okay, this one no choice, I have to manually put it into position. I think it should be here. Yep. Okay, then continue to track. Okay, what you want to avoid is that you don't want to put too many track points close to one, or rather keyframes close to one another. Right, then we can scrub back and forth and then just check, and then this one looks good. Then we can lock this. So we got 5 more points to go. Now if you want to move at a faster pace, you can also start with multiple points to track first. For example, let's say I track, maybe I start with 2 first. I want to track this point here, and then I want to track this this leaf here. Okay, maybe I want to track its shadow because it's dark and contrasty. And maybe this one is a little bit too big, just make it a bit smaller. Okay, select the bottom of the leaf here. Then with both these trackers, these new trackers then selected, then we can track forwards. Okay, one of the tracker point has already stop tracking, so we'll continue with this one first. Right now this one has stopped tracking also because of a motion blur. Okay, no, it's actually not a motion blur, it's because my search area box is now too small, so I'll just give it a bigger search area box, then let it track forwards. Okay, this one is a motion blur, so click on the search box and you can manually move it down. Okay, use your left right cursor key to check and then let it track forward. Okay, maybe I will have to reduce my correlation because right now the correlation is causing the tracking to stop too soon. Okay, maybe I'll go over to the tracking settings. The tracking settings correlation, bring it to 0.75, which was the default. So give it a little bit more leniency in tracking. Then let's continue to track. Hopefully it doesn't stop. So 0.9 might be a little bit too strict, that's why the tracking stops. Okay, so we can lock this one. Let's go back to this one. It actually stopped tracking right about here. So again, the correlation of the tracker, maybe bring it down to 0.75. Increase the search area a bit and then let it track forwards. Okay, the edge is going to touch the search box, it's going to stop. Okay, so I'm going to increase the search area box size and also maybe reduce the area of interest. Okay, same thing, increase the search area box, then let it continue to track. Oops, I'm searching the wrong, tracking the wrong direction, press escape. Okay, let it track forwards. Okay, then this one actually goes in all the way nicely. So let's lock this, and then I want to change my correlation this time to 0.75 because 0.9 is too strict. That means that if it doesn't match the previous data, it will just stop tracking. So right now we have 5 track points, we need 3 more to go. So I want to track this point over here. Okay, there's a dark spot over here. I'm going to track this dark spot. Let's take a closer look at it. Okay, and let's change the shape to match the perspective. Okay, then track forwards. Okay, increase the search area. Okay, change the shape of this area of interest and then continue to track. Okay, so this one is motion blurred quite badly, so you can click on here to move the track point here. Increase the search area a little bit more and then hopefully it will track all the way to the end, and which it does. Okay, so let's see. Alright, there's a little bit of shift, but that should do. Okay, let's look for another track point. Okay, maybe this one here. This one is a good track point. Control, left mouse click. Scale it up a little bit. Okay, maybe I want to track this tip here where you see a color transition. And let's track backwards from here. Okay, the area of interest is touching the search area, so let's increase the search area box and then continue to track all the way to the end. Okay, now we scrub to the last frame before we started to track this, and then we're just going to let it track forwards. I'm going to increase the search area a bit, and it should track all the way to the end. Okay, I see a little bit of sliding there, so we're going to fix that. Go back just the point, just before it starts to slide, right about here. Then you can delete all the track information, and then maybe we're going to scale this up so that it has more pattern to track, and then let it track forwards, and then we have a much more accurate track. Okay, now we can lock this one. Okay, we have 6, 7. Okay, we just need one more track point. So I'm going to track this leaf here, this green leaf here. So I'm going to start from the center so I can see it a little bit clearer. Holding down Control, left mouse click, then scale this up so you can see the green leaf. I'm going to track the edge of the leaf about here. Then I'm going to just track forwards. Okay, the motion blur causes it to lose track, so I'm going to manually move it back into place. Click on the center, move this back into place, use the cursor back, left, right, cursor, move it into place. Okay, maybe just move this up slightly, then let it continue to track. And because of the larger search area, you can see that it slows down quite a bit. We might not have this issue with the location, but location might not be as accurate. So we're going to just track backwards. Okay, so far it's sticking. Okay, we have a motion blur. I'm going to activate another keyframe and then manually move it into place. Okay, you can see the yellow zone is starting to appear, but this area here is not is still red because the tracker only ends tracking at this frame. So we need to put another tracker that will run across the entire timeline, and then we will be ready to solve. So let's go and look for another good track point, and I see one over here. Holding down Control, left mouse click, and then I'm going to track this dark patch here, increase the size slightly, and then I'm just going to start tracking without adjusting the perspective. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and maybe change the shape a little bit of the area of interest, and then I'll just track forwards. Okay, so I'm going to change the shape here a little bit, maybe increase the search area and also the pattern size, and then search. And then I think that's it. Okay, so now you can see everything is now in the yellow zone. Now there is a few frames right about this area here that is still showing red. That means, right, I'm having some bad tracker points here. Okay, I got a tracker right there is disconnected, which is tracker number 4. So go over to this frame here. This is tracker number 4. So let's click on tracker number 4, and then let's try to bridge the gap here. So I'm going to track frame by frame to connect it all the way. Alright, so now it's connected, and then we can lock this, and now everything is yellow. We can now solve the scene. Now before you solve, always save a scene. I'm going to save it as tracker version number 3 and hit solve. So if you solve without putting in the correct keyframe, you're going to get a very high error value. Right now, there's no parallax motion in frame 0 all the way to frame 40. So 1 to 30 is not a good number. In fact, let's just solve and see what happens. We'll get out an error. Actually, it's 16.3, but it's still quite high. So you can see the curves, right, is giving you these weird patterns. Okay, since I've solved this area quite a number of times, the best keyframe, right, is actually around 70 to 90, right, where there's some forward movements and then there's a slight side movement that shows some parallax. So 70 to 90, okay, will be a good keyframe, and then I hit solve. Okay, I end up with a higher error instead. Okay, so in this case, right, maybe it's the combination of the different trackers that is giving me this problem. So I'm gonna try another range. Maybe I'll try 105. Sorry, this is 165. Okay, so I'm gonna press Shift S and then use the pie menu to select keyframe A, and then maybe move a few more frames forward, and keyframe B at 173, and then I'll solve. Okay, actually it got worse. So I will try to find a better range. Okay. Okay, sometimes you will have to keep looking for the good keyframes. I'm going to try 50, 60, see whether I get a good result, or actually that's worse. 60 to 80, let's see that. Okay, that's even worse. So maybe 70 to 85. 146, now we're getting somewhere, maybe 88. Okay, we're not getting some good results here, maybe 75 to 95. 53, and you can see the bumps are going up and down. So sometimes if you got this kind of problems, right, you might have to put in more track points. That means the quality of my track points, right, might not be that good. Okay, so if you get an error that is this high, okay, so sometimes it's just because we don't have enough parallax information, right, to solve this area. Okay, maybe I'm going to try another different region here. Okay, this one is A, and then maybe B. Let's try this one. 3. Okay, we are making good progress. So right now I managed to get the error down. So that's why sometimes if you only have these few tracker points, right, you might have to go and search the best keyframe range. So once I got this keyframe range is getting an error of 3, then I can now activate focal length and then hit solve. And you can see now I got an error of 0.62. So I can refine this further by looking at the dope sheet, and in this case, right, tracker number 6, right, has the highest error. So I can click on tracker number 6, go to tracker number 6, and then under its what I call its weight, right, we're going to bring it down to the solve weight, bring it down to maybe 0.5. That means we're going to give it about 50% priority in solving. Then I'm going to hit solve again. So 0.6, I managed to bring the error down to 0.51 pixels, which is, I think, for this purpose is good enough. Right, so now that we have solved this, we can save this file. We can save it, all right, and then just before we lay it out, okay, we want to first establish where is the flaw. So go over to the orientation, select 3 points, 3 trackers rather, holding down the shift, 1, 2, 3, make sure that they are quite far apart. Okay, maybe I'll select these 3 points instead, and then I'll say that this is the flaw. Okay, right now the orientation is set to the flaw, and then I can now click on one of the points. Let's say I want to set this as the origin, so I set this as the origin. Right now my scale looks a little bit too big, so I need to select 2 points, shift, holding down the shift, select 2 points, and then maybe the distance I want to set it at 4 units. Okay, 4 units between these 2 points, and then click on set scale. Okay, then finally I want to set this as a background, and I'll set up the tracking scene. Okay, next I want to set up the axis. Now I want this line across here to be the x-axis, so I'm going to click on this point. This is the origin, so on the right hand side I want to set this as the x-axis. Okay, so if I scrub my timeline right now, the camera will be constrained to the motion tracker, as you can see over here. Now if you want to fine-tune it, like I noticed that my x-axis is not really lined up with the straight edge of this playground floor, go over to the layout, and then go to layout tab, then look through the camera by clicking here. You can also increase the color of this backdrop by selecting the camera. You can select the camera outliner here, go over the camera tab, go to background images, and then check up the opacity. You can turn on X-ray by clicking on this button, and then with the camera selected, you can click this drop down menu and click on 3D cursor, so that when I rotate, you can use the rotate tool here to rotate, to adjust. Okay, but I find this rotation a bit finicky. I prefer to use the shortcut tools in Blender. So you press R followed by Z, so that I'll be rotating along the Z axis. Okay, so you can scrub the timeline and then check whether your perspective line, the edge of this floor plane, is it matching. Now if your floor plane is too small, you can select the floor plane and then you can press S to scale it up, and then you can see whether it is lining up along the tile properly. Okay, so this one is lined up. I think everything is lined up perfectly. So now I'm going to select this cube, press G followed by Z1, so that it's sitting on top of the surface. And now I'm ready to export this out to Maya. To export it out to Maya, first we save as a copy first. For this version, I want to call it _solve. And then click save. And then I'm going to now export this. Now before you export this, you need to detach the constraint of the camera. So select the camera, click on the constraint, and then convert this constraint of the camera movement into into actual movement, because right now it's being constrained to the match move. So we need to click on the button, constraint to F curve. Okay, once that is done, if you see the graph editor, you notice that the selected camera is showing the actual motion curve. Previously, before the conversion, right, or before being attached to the F curve, you don't see this at all. So now we are ready to export this into FBX. Okay, so to export to FBX, you just click on File, Export, FBX, and make sure you change the scale value from 1 to 0.01. I find that this is the best scale settings. Then if you click on the big animation settings, the simplify change to 0. Now if you don't change the simplify to 0, it's going to look at your curve, and any noisy areas, right, or rather any points, right, that are looking very similar, you actually reduce your number of keys for you. Actually, we do not want any keys to be reduced, so we need to sample it at every frame, and we don't want to simplify. Then now we can export the FBX. Then now we go to Maya. We'll launch Maya. Okay, so now we can bring in the FBX. So of course, you need to set your project first. I'm just going to import it straight away and then show you what are the things you need to do next. So import. Okay, go over to the folder containing the exported file, which is this one, FBX, and then import. The first thing you notice is that the camera is very big, and if you scrub the timeline, check the frame rate. Is actually exported to 25 frames. Okay, I think if it is not, that means I did not set my frame rate right at the beginning. Yeah, that was my mistake. So the frame rate here was 24 frames, but actually the footage was shot at 25 frames per second. So just make sure that your frame rate is correct. So anyway, my Blender was set at 24 frames, so it exported to Maya FBX, so it's 24 frames. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, now select the camera. You want to break the scale of the camera. Otherwise, right, if the scale of the camera is too big, you will not be able to see your image plane. So select the camera, go and highlight, shift select all the values of the scale, right mouse click on it and break the connections, then change the value to 1. Right, so select all the values and change it to 1. Look through the camera. Okay, so that now when I scrub the timeline, we are seeing what the camera is seeing, and next we go and click on view image plane, go and import in the image sequence. Okay, click on the first frame, then click on the image attributes, and then click on use image sequence. Now if your frame rate, everything is been set correctly, then if you scrub the timeline, everything should match nicely. So that's how you use the powerful tracking features of Blender, and then use it in conjunction with other software like Maya in this case. So at this stage, you can bring in any other 3D models, render, and then comp it using another compositing software.